Welcome to episode 2 of Concept to Culture. We have with us today architect Karthik, who is the principal architect of Tangance Studio. I have known him for years now, and there's a lot of architectural conversation, a lot of love that we share for the profession off camera as well. So today he's here to talk to us about a topic which is called Built for Meaning and how everyday architecture shapes the way we live. So thank you, Karthik, for doing this once again with me. And before we sort of get started with understanding how architecture or design can shape our everyday life, I will get started with letting you to tell us a little about the Tangent Studio.
Yeah. Hi, Pooja. Thank you for getting us into this conversation. It's always more learning and it's more engaging when we have such conversations. It opens up different perspectives, and thank you for having this. Yeah. So my name is Karthik. So I run a small practice called Tangent Studio. We are basically into a small scale and medium scale practices where we do a lot of residential and interior and hospitality and commercial sort of a practice. Um, we primarily concentrate on designing the spaces which revolves around the client's requirements and client's needs. In our experience of where we've worked and all those places, there we see a space where the architect tends to kind of impose their creative ideas or designs on the clients when probably that would not be the need or that would not what the client would be aspiring to look at. So we thought, then the client would again come back and say, I didn't like this, but still you insisted and
Mhm.
we got this done. So we wanted to somewhere reach a midpoint and say, see, we also want to do what we like, and at the same time, we want to meet your requirements. So that common point where we meet is the tangential point is where the Tiny Studio came up with. That's the whole idea behind the Tiny Studio practice.
Perfect. That's lovely. I think the importance of meeting midway is so, this is why also we're having these conversations, right? The importance of meeting midway and how do you do it when you just start off with practice? I'm sure you've been in practice for close to a decade now, right? And you've learned it. It's a skill. So I think I'd start off today's discussion by asking you, how do you approach embedding a sense of space or a sense of identity into a place, especially using culture as, the cultural identity, or how do you make a space feel like it is a home? When there is something called a house, there's something called a home, even with respect to commercial projects, right? How are we creating or embedding a sense of place and identity when we create?
Yeah. So the initial approach when we start designing any space, we certainly do have the client requirements. I mean, so there's an approach what we follow. So we have a questionnaire, right? So which is like, 6 or 7 pages of questionnaire which we send it out to the clients, which has a
Mm-hmm.
very detailed set of questions and they answer it back to us. It's a bit of yes, training process for the clients, but it it helps us understand not just the client's requirements, but it also helps us understand what the clients are as a person, right? So, what is their lifestyle? So, what are their habits? So, what is that sort of environment that they would prefer to have around? So, your home is your comfort zone, right? So, everybody will find comfort zone in different, environments, right?
Avenues and aspects, yeah.
Yes, yes. So there are different things which probably gives you that comfort. So for them to attain that comfort zone, they probably would not consciously know certain things. So when we put out this questionnaire and we kind of get a hang of what the client's mindset is, or what their lifestyle is, and all those, it might not help us to a large extent, but yes, it does definitely give us the initial thought that we
Inspiration.
say. Yeah. So
Hmm.
from there we pick it up and we start designing the space. The second approach is any space that we design is like when if I'm the end user, how would I want it, right?
Hmm.
So how am I going to look and feel at the space, and how am I going to approach a space? So what is space giving to me is what we initially look at, right? So then that from so we slowly start detaching ourselves and see then if the client would be okay with that space now. So
Correct.
initial phase is like, if I am okay, then only then I would be recommending it to my clients, right? So I would not be doing
Right.
something which I am not okay with. So then when we
Mm-hmm.
do this sort of a practice, or when we follow this thing, it helps us, somewhere embed a bit of our culture, and also what the whole what do you say, uh, the holistic approach, right? The wholesome experience that you're trying to give, or what the client is wanting for the space, is somewhere going to come in slowly in bits and pieces. So there,
Mm-hmm.
from there again, with a lot of discussions and with a lot of iterations, then, and it also happens, sometimes the client would not want something, but we know
Mm-hmm.
the client would actually want it, but in a different way, right? So we trying to
Yeah.
put some sense into them, maybe explain why this is done, what is the idea behind it. So then they will probably sometimes do get a sense of it, and then they'll say, yes, this makes sense. Yeah, let's go with that. So yeah, so this is the sort of thing we slowly start putting into the space.
Yeah.
And while we also do this, we also keep in mind that at the end of the day, the end user is the client, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what I personally believe is, whenever we are designing any space, there's a little. So when you're talking about culture, I think there's a bit of personality also during that culture phase, and when we design a space, there's a little bit of personality that goes into that particular space. Probably a little bit of my personality. Say if I
Mm-hmm.
am some, like, to give you a very basically, so if I am someone who likes like a 6 feet or a 7 feet door. Okay, just to give you on a very basic level, I'm a person who likes it 6 or 7 feet door. But if the client is someone who likes 8 or 9 feet door, so there's a difference in the way of thinking, right, between both of us. But if I am putting my idea, say I want to go with 6 or 7 feet door, then the little bit of my personality is going into that space, right?
Yeah.
So I feel whenever we design any space, I always say it's not just the client's
Yeah.
home or their space that you're doing, but there's a little bit of our personality also which is going into um, that particular space.
No, that's very true, and you put this so well because in the previous episodes, I was talking to the principal architects of Studio Limpid Box, and we spoke about this. That sometimes maybe architecture is a practice. It's a very spiritual practice because you have to surrender your ego. Right? It's, I think
Yes,
sometimes you have romanticized design so much that there is a lot of attachment to your design. But how do you practice being okay with that rejection? And like you said, accommodating the client because eventually he or she is going to live in this space, right? And what sets the design apart is you, your approach, your personality, and how you bring it into life. So I think, which leads me to sort of asking you, do you think culture really influences the way people live or, workspaces, for example? I think especially post-COVID, just the approach to spaces has really changed. A
yes,
terrace is not a space where we're just drying clothes anymore. A
yeah,
balcony is not just a space where I'm growing plants. It's so much more. I think the typology really shifted, right, with
yes,
respect to
yes.
this. So, do you really think culture influences the way people, think, behave, choose, from your experience when I'm sure on a
Yeah,
daily basis you're working with clients? Yeah.
yes, yes, it definitely does. It definitely does. Culture does impact on a large level to
Hmm.
most of our spaces. It definitely does. But
Yeah.
again, I think there's a bit of dilemma also in certain projects or in certain clients, as in they definitely the culture uh, that they have been there, and the culture of the space, and also the kind of space that they want. And so because of lot of, especially after COVID, there's a boon and a bane as well, right? So especially after
Hmm.
COVID, I also see a very increased research oriented clients, right? So
Mm.
they would do all their homework and then come here. And when I say homework, sometimes it's, yes, they also since they also follow a lot of social media and all those where you have
Mm.
Instagram, Pinterest, and all those. So they typically would have something like a mood board with them, like saying,
Yeah.
"This is what
Yeah.
I want."
Yeah.
Okay, so that happens. But I feel that that approach has definitely increased more post-COVID. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so during that process, what happens is sometimes the overall vision of what they want versus what they need would be
Mm-hmm.
very different,
Yeah. Correct.
right?
And I
So
think,
there's a cultural
yeah.
shift there again,
Very true. Yeah. And I think that's really where you come in, right? It can be very frustrating when you're playing the role of a designer, but there are already mood boards set out for you, which is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting parts of design, right? That curation,
right?
conceptualization. But where do you actually now come into play and say, okay, like you said, it is very important you acquaint them to information. They don't know what their needs and wants are, and how can you sort of convey, right? So do you think, again, I'm talking about young architects today, but at some point you started off, right? And there can be there can be, you can overlook when you are translating design, especially today when you're talking from concepts into real and lived projects, right? So, what do you think are some things that today's young architects, or you as a young architect, sort of overlooked that you're a lot more cognizant of today when it comes to translating concepts to reality?
I think one is the professionalism for sure.
Mm.
One. Okay, so when I say professionalism, your commitment to your professional ethics. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
and because it does also impact you on your creative thinking. Your professional
mm-hmm.
does impact on you. That I realized very later, right? So
Yeah,
your professionalism and your professional ethics, and that initial phase of say, hey, I want to do this. Okay,
right.
so that sort of that envelope that we bubble that we close with
Mm,
ourselves,
mm,
right? So that and a lot of again saying, I want to do this, or I want to put out this face, right? So when so this again will impact the creative thinking. What I've personally experienced during my initial phases of practices, when there is something which we want to do and the client is not willing to execute that particular space, uh, there is a little bit of professional which we lack, like say
yeah.
that so which is like is like a communication skill, right?
Mm,
So your communication skill is very important when you talk to a client. So I have experienced myself where I have seen my senior actually when I was working.
mm,
He would invariably convince the client to say, yeah, this works for me, right?
mm-hmm,
But I
mm-hmm.
know as an architect, but for me, I thought that okay, that was not a great design.
Yeah.
So that I think that communication skill, which probably we felt is not very important, that has
Mm,
got nothing to do with creative thinking. So somewhere it does impact you on getting those things converted into space. So
yeah.
that is something which I felt like probably I did not pay much attention to.
Attention to. No, I
Yeah,
think also this is, like when we are in architecture school, we are doing so many juries. But in hindsight, now I understand what those were, right? They were somewhere training us to communicate better, but I don't know if we take it as seriously as we do now because we know the value of it. So
right,
when I teach students, that's all I tell them. This is a practice into the bigger world, right? So these are small client pitches you're doing. Today we call it jury, but tomorrow it's real client meetings, right?
right.
So I think because we're talking about the clients, we spoke about meeting them midway. Do you think clients today are looking for something deeper in their spaces other than just say, let's just talk about luxury and aesthetics. That's layer one, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
do you think when you work with clients, they are looking for something deeper?
Yeah, I think they do. I think they do. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say all the clients, but yes, there we do have people now. We do have clients who say, this is, yeah, I want this home, but it's just not about more of, the aesthetics, the look and feel that you're trying to give, but it's also the way of living.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is my way of living in my home? This
Mm.
is my comfort zone. I would want.
Yeah.
So clients are looking more deeper, right? What does it impact on them? One is like
Yeah.
I told their wholesome experience of living in that space. Yeah, so getting that comfort zone is one. Also, what the house is impacting on the environment, what the house is impacting on the society is something what we're also seeing on an increased level these days with the recent
Mm.
clients. So they are also seeing within, they're also seeing from the outside. Earlier we used to have experiences where people not very keen on, you know, having the renewable energy resources like solar energy or rainwater harvesting or anything like that on a very serious levels. Okay, but
Yeah.
now, so those used to come during the fag end of the project, and then because of budget constraints and all those. Okay, so that discussion, but they used to happen somewhere. But then
Mm.
you actually take off or no, is a late. But that initial initiative used to be there. But now that initial initiative is happening right from the concept stage. How am I
That's
going to
great.
embed?
Great.
How am I going to embed my renewable resource into this? So, how does it impact my space as well? So, that
Mm-hmm.
give and take is there now with the clients, and also, like I told, not just the space. I mean, not just the renewable energy part, but also what the space is doing for them, what is it doing for the house people? What is it doing for the people who are going to come to the house for a limited time period, the visitors, the guests? What is the impact that they are going to have on it? And not on aesthetic level, but on a comfort level. So people are
Yeah.
do thinking more deeper how the space is going to impact on them.
No, that is so much hope to sort of hear, right? That people are no more just looking at, it's no more just status quo in some sense. It is so much deeper,
Yes.
right? The experience you want to give yourselves, people you love, people who, your acquaintances, that's one aspect. And I think it's so beautiful that you said that it's not just inward, but an outward, effort as well. And the very fact that I called you in today to talk about, do you think architecture shapes the way we live? Was pretty much for this to sort of understand that it's so profound, right? We are talking about this as a very simple topic, but if we can start making this a cascading effect, it is so phenomenal if everybody starts thinking this way in some sense, right? Even with today, office spaces are designed so well, right? I think all these have such a impending impact on well-being as well. The homes, the way you keep your homes, the way it reflects a large part of who you are, right? Even when you walk into spaces which have certain color schemes. Why is it that today in a metropolitan city like Bangalore, people love the coffee shops, people love the concept of breweries because it's a whole sense of rejuvenation in some sense. So the power of what space can do to you is also evolving, right? Than when compared to maybe the cabin offices that our parents worked in. Today, offices are, I am mind blown to sort of see what they can sort of offer, right? Which also, so I think I want to also lead this to asking you that architecture has a very pivotal role when it comes to preserving culture, when we're talking about heritage. Though I feel like with modernism coming in, there has been a lot of camouflage, a lot of overlaps when it comes to this. The old Bangalore homes don't, we rarely build anymore like that because of urbanization, etc. So, as an architect, what do you think? How do you think we can work towards preserving this culture in today's time? Because we've evolved, there's urbanization, there's commercialization. So, how do you think this can be preserved better?
I think as architects, so we have a huge responsibility on, preserving this for our future generations. Yes. But I also feel there are three entities involved. One is the architect, the other is the client or the people who are going to be around us, and the third is the governing agencies. The government
Mm.
authorities. They do definitely play a very huge role in this because the bylaws, the regulations, as long as it's going to support the clients and the what it how it sees how that space is going to impact their land. I mean, so say for example, Bangalore or Chennai, Mumbai, Karnataka, or whatever, that geography, right? So if they consciously see how is it that this particular bylaw is going to affect this, so then when all the three entities work together, that will help us preserve our heritage and culture in a very better and responsible way. Now what happens is, uh, so the both the agencies being, I mean, the client knows, the government knows, the client knows that this is not certainly not going to work, right?
Yeah.
But then, we also do things, where we can somehow try to make it work. So we would rather have an environment, or we would rather want to have, uh, the kind of, say, the zone where we are able to do it more openly, and we are able to design the space more openly and freely without any hindrance, or knowing we'll have to have any sort of problems to deal with or any of
Yeah.
those. So when these sort of I mean, when the government does gives you, or they do give you certain powers with the architects, then definitely there is the responsibility of the architects definitely does go higher, right?
Right.
So I feel as of now, the architects do not have the power that they should actually have in India.
Mm.
Right. So one will definitely be more responsible and more committed towards their country or towards their culture and heritage when they know that they have that additional responsibility or the power with them, right? So when they know
Right.
they're powerless, they know that they're not responsible, they're not accountable, right?
Correct.
So then there's nothing much they can do in their hands to preserve this.
Yeah.
So they will do as much as they can, but the limit is set there.
Limit. Yeah, and I also feel it after a point, it just becomes about bread and butter, right? It's about
Yeah.
survival and then business and
Yes.
how many projects are you getting done and what does my resume reflect? What do I have in my portfolio, right? So, what do you really think is the future of architecture, especially with the coming of AI and artificial intelligence? What is your opinion about this?
No, I like I mentioned, I do definitely feel the architects need to have the power when it comes to designing space, right?
Mm.
So So we have education institutions, we have bodies governing. So what is our specialization of architect, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, the sole purpose is to design a space, be it a built
Mm.
space or be it an open space, a vacant space. The sole purpose of architect, who eventually becomes like an urban planner or someone, is to design a space, right? So now, what is the power that you're giving that person? So, for example, if I'm a chartered accountant, okay,
Mm.
what is it I do?
Mm.
I maintain the
Yeah.
books, right?
Mm.
So I look after the
Mm.
money, and I'm
Mm.
so for the clients whom I am doing all those things,
Working
I'm
with.
responsible for it, right? So I do certain have the powers of certain signing authorities or something. So the architects do not, I feel in India, architects do not have that sole authority when it comes to designing the space, right? So anybody can design anything, and anybody can build anything.
Hmm.
So when this narrative changes, I'm sure you must have seen or heard in other countries where when it comes to building a house, you will not be able to change even a certain color of your built
Mm.
space or the outside unless you take the permission from the particular governing authority there, right?
Mm.
Because that, say, for example, you're living in a particular neighborhood. and you're building a new house there, so that that house will have to look very similar to the houses that are built in that particular neighborhood, right? So when it comes to even changing a certain form or changing materials,
Mm,
there are certain guidelines which is given from the local governing authority there in the other countries where they say
mm,
this is what you can use. But
yeah,
in and that has to be approved by the architect, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but in India, we do not have. I mean, I do not insist or say we need to have that kind of imposement, but at least the basics where you know what is the space going to have, what is the uh, area of the space that you're building, and what is the proportion, volume. So, lot of so we also do see a lot of accidents and mishaps happening now and
Mm,
there in India, right? You know, some so it is not just the engineers, the structural engineers, civil engineers who come into play, right? So if the architect do not approve such, so we as architects know, right? You know, this is something which is not going to be viable. So when we say
mm-hmm.
we don't do, so then the client will say, okay, fine, if you're not doing it to me, then I will get it done from somebody else, right?
Yeah,
But if the client knows, if not this person, I know anybody is not going to do, any architect is not going to do, then the
right,
client is not eventually go and build that kind of a space.
right. There's more
Right.
credibility for everyone, right? More
Yes,
responsibility from the side of an
exactly.
architect, more credibility from a client's point of view as well,
Yes.
right?
So when
So,
this changes, I think the overall narrative or the overall approach towards the architect will definitely impact on a very large level. On a very
hmm,
large level. I personally feel
right,
that. So I feel right now, since post-COVID, we are seeing that, you know, we're definitely seeing a huge number of people coming to architects and, you know, saying, hey, I have this particular piece of land. I want to design something. I wanted to build something. So we definitely see that approach has definitely increased a lot these days.
mm, mm,
Okay. But so like I say, you know, strike the rod when it's hot. So, you
mm-hmm.
know, I feel the governing authorities should step in right now at this particular time frame when you know we are also seeing a lot of people starting to build space post COVID now,
Yeah,
right?
mm-hmm.
So when you set the things right from the very beginning, right? So then it helps not just on what is it that's going to impact you on a geographical level, on a country level, on a culture level, but also on what your professional standards are for the people. So it will also help the professionals who are in the profession, you know, to
Profession.
aspire to do something larger than just making money out of this profession. So I feel yes, architects are definitely getting. I mean, I personally feel I can definitely see the difference in the past 3 4 years.
Mm,
So it's definitely going to be good. But yes, there has to be certain governing authorities which can help us improve that. And also, I feel there has to be certain uh, from the institutional levels, right? So from the
mm,
colleges, from the schools. So one is what we are teaching. So we see the huge gap between the architects and the students, right? That so what is it that they're doing to bridge that gap? And
yeah.
also what we say that supply demand ratio has to be
Mm,
intact.
mm. Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge right now.
Yeah.
I know of a lot of people who are trying to hire, right? But they're not able to get the right kind of candidates. There is a lesser, supply in some sense for the demand we have. So if, especially because you've been in practice, if there's one thing that you think we can do as academicians through pedagogical platforms, how can we bridge that gap? What do you
I need
think
to
could be
we need to
done?
involve lot of practicing professionals into your institutional levels. Okay,
Mm,
so yeah, we do have the concept of visiting faculties, but we need to have someone who's very serious about the profession coming as a visiting faculty,
hmm.
right?
Right. And to give
And
them a real reality check of
yes,
what the profession entails, what it holds, right? Yeah.
yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, the full-time faculties or professors, they need to do what they are good at and what they should be following. On the other hand, the practicing professionals should also give input as to what's the real practices. So that balance has to be there. So both of
Hmm.
these are definitely not going to equate with each other, right? But there
Yeah,
has to
yeah,
be a balance
right.
because see, when you have that imbalance, see, even when there's a lot of involvement from the practicing professional who comes in as visiting faculty, so they will try to put in a lot of practical knowledge into you, right, on your projects. So
Hmm.
what that will also impact is your creative ideas, right? So that might hinder your creative ideas. That might restrict you to start thinking more on a practical level than
Hmm.
let that idea bud.
Completely romanticize you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So that imbalance also should not be there. Let the students explore, let the people explore what they want to do. But then on the hindsight, let there be a thought that okay, I will try to do something later, probably how to put some sense into this on a more practical level. That is either
Hmm.
in terms of design or the approach or whatever. So that sort of balance has to be there. It can't be balanced on either sides. On
Yeah.
the design thinking level, and I think the professional practice as a subject, I always tell it
Hmm.
to my team members or interns who over join also. I think the most underrated subject in the whole architecture career is the professional practice. We
Yes.
need I personally feel we need someone, like I told, who's a practicing professional, who is very serious, who's a
Mm.
very full-time practicing professional to step in and take up the professional practice
Practice as a
subject.
subject. Mm.
Yeah, because they will put in a lot of their hands-on experience. Uh, what is their everyday problems? How are you going to address it? What are the challenges? Not just from the textbook, outside the textbook.
Hmm.
So that will help the students open up their thinking and perspectives on a whole different manner.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And thank you. Thank you so much for mentioning all this, right? Clearly, why we're doing this conversation, because I think we need more dialogue around these things for the shift to happen, right? For all of us as a community, as a fraternity of architecture and design to sort of take it forward for the betterment of our countries, for our spaces. So I think I'd sort of slowly wind down into the podcast, but I want to today, we are um, in a world where we are overly stimulated by information, right? There is architecture which is playing a very important role, in my opinion, in the social and the emotional well-being, right? So, how much do you think this? How much do you validate this as a designer? We see what's happening to people from a mental well-being point of view, from an emotional well-being point of view. There is an intentional effort through designers to make spaces better, to create open spaces, the importance of skylights, natural light, all these different things, right? So, do you think architecture is really shaping the way we live our everyday life? And can you throw some light on its importance?
Yeah. No, architecture has been shaping our lives all the
Mm,
whole generations together, right? Uh, Without architecture, I feel there is nothing we can do that without architecture, I don't think as a person you would evolve much. I feel architecture is
mm,
also one of your personality. See, for example, if I am in a very distressed mode, right? If I want to meditate, would I prefer to meditate in an office or would I prefer to meditate in a temple or a meditate or in a park and open space, right? So, so definitely I would be willing or I would want to meditate in a temple or in a open park space rather than
space.
meditate
Yeah.
in office, right? Why is
Hmm.
that? Because I know that the environment around me is going to impact my mind, right? So
Mm,
I'm doing this exercise for my mind. So I want my mind to be calm. I want my mind to be relaxed, right? So your environment has to be like that, right? So it is not that office have will have people and the parks or temple will not have people. They will have more people, right? So
hmm.
it is not that noise what the people create or the surroundings create, but what is that ambience that whole
Ambience.
space gives you. So
Mm-hmm.
architecture does help evolve a person as a person on a very large level, right? So right from how you're being brought up, so what is the space, and so definitely, like I told, right, there's a bit of personality that goes into every space. So the way how you're brought in, so how the space how you've been brought up, so you're being brought up by your parents. So your parents' thinking also will have been impacted by the space they are living in. So it's like a
Mm-hmm.
cascading effect. So that
Mm-hmm.
eventually cascades down to you. So then how you are responding to situations, how you respond to people. So what is it that gives you calm? So all
Yeah.
these, I feel architecture does play a very huge pivotal role, especially when you see on a wholesome level, or when you see a large picture. Yes, you might feel it is a very small, it might have a very small role to play, but that small role comes in at every point of time in life. So
Mm.
so when you add up to it, then I feel, yeah, architecture will have a very huge impact on you as a person, on your lifestyle, the way you live, the way you are. Yeah,
I think this is, as you were speaking, it just unfolded so many deeper layers for me when you said that it's always been the way, it's always impacted our social mental well-being. I also feel we come from a generation of, let's say, you, whether it was our ancestral or things that way, the community lives that they live, the as simple as the festivals we speak about, right? The colors that sort of are starting to reflect. All of that is architecture in some sense. And we're not talking about architecture as luxury. We're
yeah,
talking about that small outdoor cooking space that our grandmoms used to cook in. Right, the saude that they
right.
would use to actually cook
Yes,
in. The in when you go to Ahmedabad, if concepts of in Gujarat, the concept of a chowk where people came together and celebrated, right? What today we call as courtyards in some sense. We're trying to find a modern nomenclature for each of these, but I think it is a lifestyle, right? It is a
See,
lifestyle.
since you mentioned bottom, see, so you see that every, like I told, like every geographical part will have a different cultural influence on them, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
people from Karnataka might be very different from people from Maharashtra, right? But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, we all live in a house, right?
Yeah.
But then why is it
Mm-hmm.
that difference? So there
Mm-hmm.
is certainly there's a difference. There's a difference in the way how we have been living, right? See,
Mm.
now if you go to Maharashtra's, like deep down, if you look at southern Maharashtra or somewhere, there's a concept of called vadas in their
Mm.
houses, right?
Spaces. Yeah.
Yeah. So vada is basically when, so there's a huge compound wall, and then you have a main door. You open the main door, then there's no house for the next
Mm.
100, 200 feet. There's no house. There's just courtyard and there's just seating spaces, like what we call the
Mm.
jugglies and all those, right? And then the
Mm-hmm.
house starts. So
Mm.
the idea behind it is, so it's not just you who are living there. Anybody can come into your house, can sit in that space. So you have a discussion there, you have some conversations, you have some engagement with the people all around there. So then you have the house starting there. But ultimately,
Right.
your house starts from your compound, right? So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but in say now here in Bangalore, we have the compound wall, immediately we have the house, right? So then
Right.
there is, if even if I'm a person who would want to have to start my day or have to meet 20, 30 people, I just want to sit and converse with them, which will kind
Mm-hmm.
of make me feel good. Like, no, this is rather
Mm.
what something which I love doing, but I do not have that space here, right? So
Yeah.
then eventually I'm not able to do that, right? So then I'll be like, okay, fine, I'll not be able to do it today. When
Mm-hmm.
when that starts becoming as a norm for you, right?
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
slowly that trait of your personality starts diminishing, right? So
Mm.
then
Mm.
eventually that fades away. So
Correct.
versus whereas someone who's living in that Maharashtra, he's able to hold that particular character of his, or he's able to hold that personality of his type. That will
Mm-hmm.
eventually shape him as a different person.
Yeah. No, I think this is such a vast topic to honestly, if we start, into layers.
Yeah,
But today, a lot of older people who have their children who live in metropolitan cities, but they've lived in, let's say, they've lived in the farms, they've lived in estates. It's mentally very debilitating for them. There was a small research I was reading about where they said this feels like jail for us. Suddenly we're living on the 30th floor, which is luxury
Sure.
for you, but it is very suffocating for me because I've lived amid seeing the sunrise and the sunset, and here you can't even see people, right? I'm on the 32nd floor. Of course, great view, but there's just visual interaction and nothing more, right? So the
Yeah.
profanity of what spaces are doing, and I think also to uh, I think this is a concept I work a lot with when it comes to students. There is a doing aspect to design and there's a being aspect to
Mhm.
design. The
Yes.
doing is there is functional, right? There is a living room, there is a bedroom, all of that. But today we don't have that luxury of space, but your balconies, your foyers, maybe the informal seating in your living is where the being happens. That's where growth really
True, true.
happens. Like the katte in front of the homes where my granddad would sit and have the most mindful sip of coffee. That's where growth is happening, right? Where you're not really doing, you're just staying in the moment. I feel there is an importance today that we need more of those spaces. We speak more about this. We start looking at architectures. How can you create more spaces in such a stimulated world of where can I be more? Like this conversation we're having is where growth is happening, I believe, because there's some
Very
sense of
true.
being. We're so mindfully here, we're talking, right? So maybe that's also an approach that we need to start looking at design as, and not just as a building that functions or is aesthetic or luxurious. It's so much more deeper. Okay, Karthik. So I think I'll end today's session, which um, was so profound. Thank you for that. Thank you for adding so many layers. I love asking this question at the end of every podcast. Please tell us, why do you choose to do what you do? In a world that we live in with so many opportunities and so many different things, why are you choosing to still be an architect in 2025?
I I feel I'm trying to do better every day.
Mm,
So if I've reached here, I'm definitely able to reach much. I'll be able to reach in a better height, or I'll be able to do better things with a lot more experience, with a lot more knowledge that I've gained.
hmm
So yeah, so I feel like I can eventually contribute to
mm,
the people and to the society, and I feel now. I mean, I also have have had this question, like, should I definitely continue to just doing the practice that I'm doing, or should I do something else? But now I feel
mm,
like this is my stronghold. Like, I know this is my strong point. I am this person now.
mm.
So I know with this knowledge, if I'm able to do this, then with a little more experience, with a little more knowledge, I'll be able to do even much better things, and even in a much better way.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And we've spoken about this so much more. You cannot unsee design anymore. You cannot not do architecture in some sense because it has such a profound impact on you, right? Despite
Yeah,
whatever the odds, there is fulfillment. I think when you see that you are starting to contribute to shaping the world, it is a very profound, responsible place to be in. So, thank you
yeah.
so much for doing this, Karthik. Wishing you all the very best. Hope you continue to contribute, and hope we all contribute to create making architecture shape everyday lives. Thank you so much.